welcome back. I appreciate that after session one, some people like to drop out, but I'm glad everyone has come back in, so thank you for that. Okay, now I need to get access to there we are. All right, so session two is really just me, so you've got me for the next hour and a half, and the first half of this session will be evaluation of a traditional exhibit, i.e. how to judge a traditional exhibit, what's in a traditional exhibit, and then the second half will be on the class Aero Philatelic. So before we start, I just thought I'd go over a couple of acronyms that you will see from time to time. So when you go on the FIP website, you'll notice that they'll have these terms GREX, GREVs, and SHREVs. So the GREX is the general regulation for FIP exhibitions, what to expect at an exhibition. It's designed for organising committees to run a full international exhibition. The next one is called the GREVs, which is the general regulation for FIP for the evaluation of competitive exhibits. So this is the general rules for all the classes. So typically it'll break down what judges will need to do when judging. Now, for each of the classes, we have a SHREVs, which is special regulations for evaluating each of the FIP classes. And today we're going to cover the SHREVs for traditional and for aerophilately. What we were talking about a bit earlier is each of these commissions have written a guideline to cover the SHREVs and hopefully make it easier to understand both for exhibitors and for jury. So covering the classes for traditional and aero. Okay, judging is based on a criteria in Article 4. So if you go through, get to Article 4. Treatment and philatelic importance will go through, which is 30 marks. Philatelic and related knowledge, personal studies and research, 35 marks. Condition and rarity, 30 marks. Presentation, 5 marks, which is a total of 100. So we're aiming for traditional and aerophilately that they will be the breakdowns when we're judging. All right, so what is a traditional exhibit? Well, basically it's stamps. So it was one of the very first classes to have a exhibition, and it covers stamps. So the material that we can include in a traditional exhibit starts off typically with the story pre-production material. So these are proofs, essays, designs, etc. that tells the story of the printing process of the material itself. And so we include material such as pre-production. So the basis of traditional is actually stamps and stamps issued and the usage of. So postage stamps, mint and used, singles and multiples are all expected in a traditional exhibition. Also, you can see that covers are used to explain the use of that particular stamp. It's not there to tell a postal history, that's for another class, but to show you exact usage of each of those stamps. One of the interesting things to look at is variety. So many stamps have varieties or errors, as the famous one from America is the inverted Jenny, and it'd be nice to see that a couple of times. Typically in overprints, having overprints upside down, etc. So there's a whole range of things that can show up and makes the story interesting. You can use relevant documents. So particularly if it's a letter that's describing or authorising overprinting of a stamp, or if it's a notice to the postmaster about when to issue. A classical one is when can they use a bisect stamp, and without a postal act or regulation, they are illegal to use. So if you're trying to prove your story, then it's nice to have these acts in original condition. Local stamps, private delivery services, parcel companies, carrier stamps, shipping companies, etc., are all acceptable in a traditional exhibit. Plate reconstruction. So one of the things that they're looking for is in-depth study of individual stamp issues. And one of the things for classic or older stamps is the actual reconstructing by finding blocks or singles or etc. to build up a sheet. Perfins, which is holes punched in stamps for various reasons, either government departments like official service, private departments like department stores, etc., who use perfins as a form of guarding against theft, are interesting. Registration labels also and parcel labels can be used in a traditional exhibit. As you can see down the bottom, there's farmer labels as well, which is was popular in Australia for a while. Fiscal stamps authorised for postage. So when they run out of postage stamps and they do have a backlog of fiscal stamps or revenue stamps as they call, they can be used as long as there's an Act of Parliament or a regulation produced to do that, authorising it for postal use. Then showing examples of those is a good idea. Postal stationery, if it has the same indicia or the same piece as the postage stamps, or stationery cutouts, if they're used as postage stamps, can be exhibited in trad display. You can see there 4K die proof. The die proof that's used on that postal stationery is exactly the same. So therefore, that stationery item can be used to tell the complete story from the die. Postal forgeries can be used in comparison with the stamp issues. It also shows knowledge if you put in a forged stamp and you can describe it as forgery rather than not knowing it was a forgery and just sticking it in there. As you can see down below is the GB Machen's forgery. If you look quite closely, there is a lot of differences, so you can pick that up. Letters. The actual envelopes, Valentine, patriotic envelopes, and illustrated envelopes can also be used in a trade display. And you can see down in below in light blue, could also be shown in subclass 2C in postal history, which is really social stories to do with the act of postage stamps. All right, so let's look at what the judging criteria. We saw that in Grex, these are the criteria. Presentation, again, 5 points. Treatment, 20 points. Importance, 10. Judging rarity, 20 points for rarity, 10 points for condition. Knowledge and personal studies, 35 points. Again, adding up to 100 points. You need to know these inside out. You don't want to be looking them up every time we're judging. And after a while, you'll be eating and sleeping and dreaming the judging criteria. All right, so let's talk about presentation. Presentation is a very interesting thing. It's only 5 marks, but it's the most important 5 marks that you are going to see, because if the judge sees a great presentation and feels like this is going to be a good award, there's a good chance that the judge is actually going to give you an extra mark here or there if they're umming and ahhing about marks. So just saying it's only 5 points, I won't really concentrate on presentation, is not good for the exhibitor. It's also not good for the judge, because if they see lousy presentation, there's a good chance they're not going to give or work hard to give the correct points for an exhibit. So what is presentation? So obviously it's just the appearance of the exhibit, and it complements the treatment of the exhibit with its general layout. Judges will evaluate from the appearance from the point of view on how it helps the understanding of your story and the attractiveness of the story. There should be a clear connection between the philatelic material and text. So that's part of presentation. Where do you put your text? Underneath the item, above the item, to the right, to the left? Wherever you put it, it must make sense of that text and that item relate to each other. So connection between material and text is very important. Also, appropriate font size. There's no regulation on exact font size that you should use, because each of the different types of fonts have different sizes when it comes to point sizes. But you need to have an appropriate size that's easily read without being too large and be too small. We have to get a magnifying glass out to look at it. The use of tables and short paragraphs helps the understanding. So that's what we look for in presentation. And relating to non-philatelic material, enlarging parts of the stamp to help the exhibit be more understandable as well. The key item on the page is always the stamps, so the material that facilitates around it shouldn't overpower that item. Balance on each page. So presentation, each page should look balanced and it shouldn't look top heavy or bottom heavy. And also balance between the pages in a frame. And then when you stand back, the balance of each of the frames in 5 or 8 frames looks balanced. So there's a whole overall thing that we need to look at. What we're looking for is that there's no empty spaces unless you're emphasizing rarity, and that you don't fill space with illustrations of large maps and what we call space fillers techniques. Mounting is also straight and carefully done and not sloppy. That's something that becomes very obvious when you start looking at an exhibit. So this is an example of a typical traditional display where you can see that the various issues of stamps are on the above of the page, and then there is a complementary cover at the bottom of each page to show usage and how it's used. As you can see, they're nicely balanced, they're in line, they look great on 16 pages. So typically when you approach a traditional exhibit, this is the type of thing that you'll be seeing. So as far as the pages themselves, again, the items are arranged so they look balanced, that they line up with each other. Typically in this exhibit has the stamp and the production material on the top with the covers on the bottom. It makes sense in a logical era. You can see the writing is readable, and you can see that the writing is also balanced. So let's get into the treatment. So treatment is 20 points and probably the hardest thing for the exhibitor to get their head around. So often I will tell new exhibitors that treatment equals story. So what is story? Story has a beginning, a middle, end. It's exciting at the beginning, it's exciting in the middle, and it's exciting at the end. All right, there's a development of the story. The story has to be complete and it's got to be correct. So really that's the summary of what treatment's all about. So let's go through. Where do we start with treatment? The title page. The title page defines the purpose and the scope of the exhibit. So I'm showing this because it's a traditional display in a chronological development with my time period between this year and that year, this postal rate and that postal rate, this initial addition to this. It doesn't matter where it is, but purpose and scope starts on the title page. You must provide references for the subject chosen so we can also define if it is a complete story. Treatment material selected should provide a logical storyline. So if we're doing the map and kangaroo stamps of Australia, then we're going to go through each of the values and then each of the watermarks. And as everyone's collected that before, there is a complete story to be told there. You need adequate material to explain the subject without duplication. So you might think, I've got 3 proof items of the same thing. They're all quite valuable. I want to put them in, but then that's duplication. You should be able to tell the story without duplicating the items. The focus needs to be on the stamp itself and reflected in the write-up. Completeness is any missing material, particularly key items. So if the exhibitor says, I am showing the kangaroo maps issue up to the 10 shillings because I can't afford the £1 and £2, that doesn't shorten your scope. That's not a complete story. So therefore treatment will go down. Philatelic importance. another one that's difficult to get your head around, but where does it relate in the scheme of philately? So the significance of the subject within the area, in the country and the area that's exhibited. Where does this country and this particular stamp series fit in the worldwide scale? How difficult it is to collect this particular material, the challenge factor. Can someone just do another exhibit just like that? Or is this very hard to put together? All part of philatelic importance. And how much key material that you have and is present helps increase the importance of your exhibit. Rarity, very interesting subject. So rarity is how difficult it is to acquire. Rarity doesn't always indicate cost. Because you paid $20 or $20,000 for something doesn't make it rare or not rare. All right. So in assessing rarity, we need to keep in mind an objective and relative terms. Judges need to accept the difference between rarity of major printings and errors and minor plate flaws. Because people can say these are extremely rare because this is the only plate flaw that I've seen. Does that make it rare, or does that mean that the researcher hasn't done enough research? So the same quantity of each that's been recorded so far would give a different indication on rarity. Does the exhibit explain what is shown as being rare? Half of what we describe in rarity is what the exhibitor tells us. They put a plate proof on, they put a die proof on, and they don't explain it to us. You and I know that they're rare, they're very few around. But if the exhibitor hasn't told us, then I'm not convinced that the exhibitor knows the rarity of those items. Does the exhibitor use a lot of philatelically produced material? That's another indication for not being rare. Judges also consider rarity as being shown in the exhibit. Only ordinary material cannot get high points. And this is the problem when someone first starts exhibiting. And we have a tendency to say, you need to buy more rare material. I don't like that for new exhibitors. What I do like is for you to help them get points in knowledge and research, which is 35 points, far more than just rarity, in getting their treatment right, making sure they select good condition. So even though rarity is 20 marks, it's not the first thing that I will say, but it's the easiest thing for the judge to say at feedback. And I think before you start costing the exhibitor more money, you need to help them get extra medal levels with the other areas. Does the exhibit have many rarities getting close to maximum points? So adding more rarities, should it generate more points? Maybe not. Will it add to importance and knowledge? Definitely will. Okay, levels of rarity. So the judge can consider that there's primary material, which include world rarities. There's secondary material, which include great rarities and important items, and supporting material, which includes the unusual, something you've discovered, and that could be a plate flaw or a die flaw on the die proof or something like this, where people haven't discovered things. So there's a whole range of areas to look at rarity. So primary material would be the highest known rate of franking on cover. That could be a good rarity. Single use of a rare stamp on cover with correct rate, also another area for rarity. Earliest usage of the stamp, that could be a good indication of rarity. Largest multiple of stamps. So the largest or the block known, that could be a good rarity as well, because many stamps there is no surviving sheets, so it's often whoever records the largest block, it's recorded. If you have it, then that's accepted as rarity. Secondary material includes greater rarities, archival documents supporting the stamp issue, covers bearing the stamps, showing special rates, routes, destinations. While it's not postal history, when we're describing rarity, if that is telling the story of the traditional stamps, then that'll get closer to a good rarity mark. The use of rare and significant hand stamps. rare and important cancellation on stamps. Again, described by the exhibitor. It helps in knowledge as well, and it helps in their rarity mark. Abnormalities on paper, watermark, perforation, colours, described, research, and not common is all going to add to rarity. So secondary material includes some of the above categories that we're spoken about, but slightly more common. So maybe there's 3 or 4 larger sheet recorded, but they're all the same size. It still would be included. And you need to include the facility if it helps you understand the exhibit. There's supporting material, not so common, plate cylinders, printers waste. There's a whole heap of areas that you can research, discover, may not cost as much as a die proof, but it tells the story and there's not a lot around. Also, other supporting material can be collector's specimens and collector's proofs. So often a printer might produce 200 specimen proofs. Again, as long as it's recorded and the quantity's known, you can argue about that. Rare material tends to attract forgers' attention. So the exhibitor must be aware that there are fake stamps, covers, and errors out there. There are fake postmarks and stamps. There are fake overprints and perfins, very easy to do, fake perforation errors, and fake archival material. So we use an expert group to examine these. If it's fake and it is described by the exhibitor, then you would give it additional research mark for doing it. If it's a fake and it's not known by the exhibitor, then that's not going to help their case. Condition. I mean, most times you can look at an item and say, this is in really good condition. It can get 10 marks, but the condition must also relate to the country. For instance, if it's Singapore or Indonesia, where there's a lot of humidity and nothing looks perfect after it's been manufactured, then you have to allow for that. If it's very early postmarks gone through the post, people weren't collecting covers in those days, it may not be perfect, but it's the best that they can get, then that condition also. So when assessing condition, we should look for always the best possible. So if you've got multiple stamps, you pick the best one, the most centered, the cleanest perforations, etc. Try to avoid any repaired stamps with covers that will reduce your points. If it's stated repaired, then the judge may refer to the item to an expert team. And postmarks on stamps and covers should be the clearest examples unless they do not exist. So if it's the only cover known, you would accept a poor postmark because of that. Condition and rarity. Well, rarity is still in our mind. Judges realise that an item in remarkable condition may be truly exceptional, though a large number of examples might exist. So even having the best of something that there's a few known, then that would help in rarity. On the other hand, rare material in poor condition will not score as high as material that does exist in better condition. So there's a bit of a balancing act for the exhibitors to consider. Philatelic knowledge, personal study, 35 points. This is just over a third of the marks the exhibitor is going to get. It's the one they can improve most dramatically. It's the hardest one to judge in the beginning because there's a lot of things to consider. So there's implicit and explicit knowledge, and there's personal research. So the implicit knowledge is the material that they've selected to tell the story. Have they chosen the right material to tell this story? The explicit knowledge is have they explained each of the items that they are showing to tell that story, and we need to look at both. So they might have selected beautiful material, but they haven't told us anything about it. Or they might have not completed the story, however, their write-up is good. So there's a balance between implicit and explicit knowledge. Research and personal study, we're always looking for new information presented as part of the story. So we encourage exhibitors to do their own research. They know their subject better than you and I, and if they've discovered new things, then that needs to be incorporated into their exhibit. So implicit knowledge, assessing material should be included or not included from telling the philatelic story. We need to find out if there's gaps in the story. And often new exhibitors, it'll be the highest value or the most expensive item. And if they hide it well and we don't see it, well, good on them. But most times the judge, if they've done their research, will know what's missing. Please don't assume that every traditional display will have proofs and essays, because in some case none is not known, and a judge can't assume that every issue has proofs, etc. So you need to do your research before you start penalising an exhibitor. Also, the exhibitor will be wise to tell us in the beginning that these things do not exist, and then that'll stop us from looking for them. All right, so explicit knowledge is determined by how accurately they describe it. Remember, treatment is development, is completeness, and also is it concise or accurate? So that's all part of the explicit knowledge. Judge should determine if the relevant information about the stamp has been noted, and typically we're looking at printing qualities, shades, perforations, watermarks, postmarks on used stamps, cases of rarity and how many are known. What we've got to teach them is to avoid lengthy write-up, because we only have about 15 minutes to judge 5 frames. So we don't need lengthy paragraphs. We need them to tell us exactly what they've got in as short as possible time, in shortest possible amount of words. Yeah, rarity and significant items should be highlighted and explained. So implicit versus explicit. So here is a stamp that's on a cover, initially described as 1874 cover, Hong Kong to Melbourne via Gall and Frank, 24-cent green watermark, 18-cent no watermark as a late fee. That's really just a description that a dealer would use. What's the most important thing that's on this stamp is on this cover is the stamp. So the first thing it needs to describe is what the stamp is and anything particular about it, and then everything else can come later. So the implicit knowledge is showing you that your knowledge of late fees and also how these are franked. Explicit knowledge, the description is an auction catalogue description. So let's have a look what it should look like. So here is a good write-up of this cover. So 24-cent green watermark crown CC showing. So straight away they're talking about the stamp on the cover, and then everything else is all the information that they have learned, and then what that cover is used for. So this is the type of how they should write up. And if you look at right up and they look different, they have different styles, you know they're just using catalogue, auction catalogue or dealer's descriptions. If they have a way of writing it up that's similar on each of the covers, then you know they're attempting to write it correctly each time, and they're using their own knowledge. Personal study. Subjects relatively unstudied areas, judges could expect to find a good deal of personal study. All right, are we going to see personal study with a penny black? Probably not, but there could be one or two other items. So that could be a difficult area. However, there's many stamp issues that have had almost no research done, and personal study can shine in those exhibits. Again, showing a nice page. The descriptions are, as you can see, not in paragraph forms under each of the stamps, but pretty much like dot points. You can see on the top left-hand side, the only recorded and perforated stamp, showing rarity and blocking it out to get you to see it. Still, again, nicely balanced in here. So what are we expecting as a good philatelic judge? We need you to do accurate preparation before you get to the exhibit. It's one thing that's very important. We ask them to put references on the title page. You need to go and find those references and at least read them up or make some photocopies for you to have when you're evaluating. Judges judge all exhibits within the time frame allocated. If you've got 20 exhibits and you've got 2 days to do it, you divide out the amount of working hours, you find on average you get 15 to 20 minutes to judge 5 to 8 frames. So you can't be mucking around spending your time reading lengthy paragraphs. You do have the ability, you're in a jury, to consult more experienced judges in other classes. So if you're concerned about a cover description in your traditional item, you can go to the postal history people and ask if they know anything about this particular item, this particular stamp. The whole jury is there for you to access. So please do that. When you have given the mark and the exhibitor is there for feedback, you need to give them good, helpful feedback. Don't tell them just what's wrong. In fact, I prefer you only to tell them what they can do to improve it. Tell them what you like about the exhibit and then tell them what they can do to improve it. And I never tell them about getting more material until they can get their marks up to 90 plus. All right, always be courteous to every exhibitor. We do everything in a harmonious way. We're trying to provide useful information, and I always congratulate the exhibitor no matter what medal level that they get. So this is an opportunity for me to break before we do the next session, and it's also a good time to ask questions. So if you've got any questions, I would like to hear it pretty much now, if you've got anything. So I've done a wonderful job by the sounds of things.
Excellent.
No, I wasn't asking for that, Tony, but thank you very much. When you're live in front of people, you can see people raising their hands, and that's the time to answer the questions. But if you've got something now, please fire away. If it's about trad or about judging or anything that we've just gone through, happy to answer that.
Glenn, one of the things I think we're going to hear is similar comments from all the classes.
Definitely.
Because some of it is the same.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm going to ask the same question every time.
Good.
What makes traditional different to the other classes? What makes it different?
Okay. Well, there's 2 things about traditional. First of all, it's all about the stamps, as we've gone through. And there's one little rule in the Grecs that says, if no one can work out where this exhibit can be judged, because we do get the odd exhibit that doesn't meet any classes, then the traditional team will judge it. For instance, Derek Pocock put in his philatelic ties that he's got from every philatelic exhibition, and he expected it to be judged. So what do? He put it in social, thinking postal history should look at it as a social thing. Postal history then come back to traditional and says, we've given it 22 marks. Can you do any better? Because that's how it works. We judged, he had a title page. He met all the criteria for the title page. He met the title, so we gave him reasonably well for treatment. For rarity, very hard for us to judge, and he didn't tell us. Research and knowledge, there was very little of it. So I think we scored at 30 or 32, but it was a better mark than postal history. So number 1, it judges everything else that can't be judged by any other class. The second thing is, it was the beginning. So most people start collecting stamps first, and it's their first love. Eventually, people move into other areas, and it could be other classes like aerograms, or it could be revenues, etc. But it's primarily about the stamp. Now, the marking is the same as everything else, but typically we expect to see stamps on pages, but we like to see covers, etc., documents. No different to anything else. Now, I'm sure stationery are going to say the same thing. Revenue is going to say the same thing. But please ask that question to everybody. It's a good one to keep us on our toes. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I have a question. I have, in my exhibit, I have the main references on the front page.
Yeah.
But as I go through, as there's, say, a specialist article or something like that, I refer to that. So the judge won't see that till they're actually in front of my exhibit.
All right, that's a good, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. However, if you want the judge to be prepared to judge your exhibit, 4 to 5 of your major references that you use. If you're going to reference one item to an article that you've done or someone else has done, then the fact that they haven't seen it shouldn't make too much difference with the points you're going to get. What is important is that they've done enough research that they understand your story, so we can give you the best treatment mark and the best research mark. An individual item with another research, I'm happy for you to put it down, but to be honest, I won't be writing it down and chasing it later on, because once you've got your mark, then we start talking about your exhibit. So
Yeah.
But if there's an important reference, please put it on the front page as well, because that's the only clue you're going to get on what the exhibitor has been using to help develop this story.
Well, generally they're articles in philatelic, magazines and bulletins where someone's done the research, and so it's only a one-off. And that's why I haven't put them.
Yeah.
I mean, I refer to the bulletins in the main on the title page, and then after that, I sort of put, the specifics of what I've looked at in those bulletins.
All right, and
sort of like stamp varieties or something, or
the advantage of that, Lynn, and that's the best thing to do, is we know that you are researching the subject and that you're actually reading articles. So therefore, on your implicit research and knowledge, we would probably mark you higher than someone that didn't do that. I love the new beginner because they got to put something on the references. So it's Stanley Gibbons' World Encyclopedia, which really tells us nothing, and Wikipedia, which is horrible because if I go and look it up tomorrow, it could be gone. So you're putting a link on your front page. So I prefer no one to put a website on the reference page unless you know it's going to be there every time I click on it. But Wikipedia is one of those things, it's changing on a daily basis, so be very careful with that.
So Glenn,
what I'll just finish, what you will see in Europe is everyone putting QR codes on those personal research. You can click on your phone if you really want to have a look at it, and the item will come up straight away. But that's not a mandatory thing. That's just a trend that's happening in Europe.
I would know how to do that.
If the bibliography is for the judges, then Wikipedia and even a general reference to a bulletin doesn't help us at all.
Yeah.
It has to be we were going to ask that it be a specific reference, that a general reference to, I can't even think of a bulletin right now, but, APF news, saying that the general reference wouldn't help anyone, would it?
Well, it does a little bit, like if you're involved in a study group and you're quoting, recorded known items from that study group and it's in that journal, at least you've got an idea where they're getting that information, because sometimes you see 4 recorded or 4 known. Well, I need to know who's recorded it, and that's important. But Steph's right. Give us the bulk of your story will probably be 1 or 2 major references, and we need to know what they are.
Yeah.
Hi, Glenn. I'm just up to the assignment, a scary part.
Yeah.
I'm just appreciate you, after finish each presentation, like today, we just finished. Talk about something about, our assignment.
Yeah.
That will be great help. We don't need to tell us answer, but just if I can give you a little bit idea that you can tell me we are on the right track or we are the wrong track.
Yeah.
Something like you mentioned, we need to find out exhibit from West Australia. We have find out appropriate.
All right. Yeah.
class medal. So what can be a exhibit title will be, it's because Western Australia, huge exhibit.
Yeah.
So something like that.
You're almost there, Echo. You pick the title and then tell me what
Yes.
I'm expecting to see in that. So if you want to just do the fourpenny blue swan and then tell me everything that's available, I'll accept that, because I'm not here to ask you to scope out all of Western Australia, the whole colony and everything that's involved. You just tell me something and then I know that you've actually looked it up and you've got an idea. So please don't stress too much about the assignment. Just put the effort in. If you want to modify a question and give me an answer on that, I'm happy for that, because I've had someone going, I don't like any of those thematic titles, I'm going to throw them out and do another one. As long as you tell me your plan, etc., I'll accept that. The assignment is pass or fail, and really it is effort or no effort. And if you put the effort in, you're going to pass. So don't worry about particular wordings or anything, but you're on the track. So thank you. Good question, Echo.
No, it's just last one. It is going to be a dot point, or will be the
dot point's fine. Don't give me an essay, because I don't want to be reading a book.
Will be few hard. If you write down the right way, it will be at least 50, 60 pages, because everything.
Just tell me I'm going to see the proof material. I've got some documents from Delarue or Waterloo, whichever issue you just tell me that. I'm happy with that.
Thank you.
All right. All right. I'm just going to have a 1 minute break myself, and then we'll get into Aero Philately. So if you guys need to get a drink of water or a cuppa, do it right now. Oh. All right. So I've had me minute. So we've just done traditional, and then a question that I normally get is, why do I need to do all the other classes when I'm only ever going to judge traditional? That's a very good question, very valid. I'm hoping you have 2 classes at least you want to judge, or it gets very hard for an organising committee to pay for your flight and accommodation if you're only going to judge 1 class. So consider judging several classes. That's point number 1. Point number 2, the jury is a team that evaluates all the exhibits, and anyone can challenge another jury team if they're not happy with the marks they've given. You can only challenge another team if you understand that class. At the end of it, when the roll call's been made and all the medal levels have been agreed on, we all vote to say we agree with that medal level. So when you leave that jury, everyone has agreed with every medal. And the one thing we don't want to hear is someone saying, no, you got robbed, I would have given you a gold, they only gave you a silver. That ain't going to happen, all right? So to be able to put your hand up and say, I agree with all those medal levels, you need to understand not specialize, but understand every class. As far as judging the class, as long as you've got a vermeil in that class, you will judge it for your first one. If you've got a second exhibit, you get a large silver, you'll be judging that as your second. And if you can do several other classes, you become more valuable, and more people on organising committees would be quite happy to bring you on the team. So if you really want to judge, become a really good exhibitor in multiple classes. All right. So let's talk about the class that really should be the class you should be judging. That's Aerophilately. Let me just... All right. Judging Aerophilately. The main key for what we're doing is to know and understand the regulations and apply them correctly and fairly. So to a point where we don't get pedantic about full stops, etc., but we do correctly score the marks, and we do it fairly as well. All right, so the first thing you've got to understand in Aerophilately is there is actually two classes, two areas. They're called subclasses. So one is subclass A and one is subclass B. So what is subclass A? So basically, it's any document, postal document, that has been flown. So if you go on Perth to Sydney, it's an aerogram or an air letter, or it's paid the rate to go by air correctly, then that is the document that we can display. What we're looking for is development of postal routes by airmail, etc. We need to look at everything, including the markings, the vignettes, and the way the transportation has gone. Items connected with the means of transport but not conveyed through the postal service may be important for the development of airmail. So part of what we saw is, as the airmail routes were being developed in the 20s and 30s, that part of the way would fly an item, and then the rest might be by train or truck or ship. Leaflets, messages, newspapers dropped by air, normal postal deliveries, when postal services are interrupted, and unforeseen events, all interesting things in part of the airmail exhibit. And mail recovered from aircrafts that had an accident or an incident, often referred to as crash mail. Subclass B is the actual stamps used in airmail in both mint and use, on cover, essays, proofs, varieties associated with airmail stamps. You could say that subclass B is the traditional part of airmail or Aerophilately, and that would pretty much describe it. So if you're specializing in airmail stamps, then that becomes subclass B. So what's the essential items that we're looking for in a good airmail story? So the problem is, and this is always the problem, the rules tell you what to do, but not how to do it. Every exhibit must tell a story. The whole point of putting material together is the public can look at from the beginning to the end and understand the story of what you're trying to tell. A good title page is essential. And in fact, a title page is mandatory. So in the Grevs, if we require a title page, it should include the title which describes the context of the exhibit. You can have an introductory statement which gives you the concept of the exhibit, and you state the purpose of the exhibit. My purpose for showing this airmail exhibit is to explain how the route between Perth and Adelaide was developed in the late 20s, something like that. Then you need to define the scope, whether it be Aerophilately or traditional. The scope is typically the period of time, or it could be the actual item itself and how long it was going for. You need to have a plan which helps the judge know how the story is treated. There should be a rarity statement, an idea on how you're defining your rarer items, why items would be rare. For instance, you know, I'm doing airmail in and out of New Hebrides. The population is 2,500. The chances that it's going to be a lot of mail in and out of New Hebrides would be quite minimal. So I'm letting the judge know that I'm already telling you that quite a bit of my material will be rare. And the last thing you need to put on, as we discussed with traditional, is literature references. It'd be nice to have 5 or 6 of serious references that you've used yourself. If there's just the one, put the one in. Don't make up all the others, because you don't want to upset the judges by them reading stuff that they didn't need to read. Right, contents of an Aero exhibit. What can be shown? Of course, covers, including picture postcards if they're flown. Aero postal stationery, aerograms, air letters, etc. Aero stamps, the stamps that are made for airmails. Airmail markings, including juscus and cancellations of annulments, etc. It depends on the story and the title of the exhibit. All right, treatment. We spoke a bit about treatment, remembering it's a story and it has a beginning, middle, and end, and they all should be balanced, and it all should make sense, and it should be complete, and it should be correct. So aerophilatelic subjects typically combine roots, rates, and markings on the covers to tell the story. How do you arrange the exhibit? You can do it chronological. This is the first item that flew. This is the next time the items are flying, etc. So you can just do it from one period to another. Or you could pick a rate period and say, okay, when the airmail rate was threepence in Australia, I'm concentrating just on that period. Or it couldn't be event. What happened to airmail during World War II, particularly as the Japanese and the Germans were taking over more and more territory, the airmail routes changed on a regular basis. So your story might be a particular event. Start and end dates, make sure that they're logical. So if it's World War II, it should be from 1939 to 1945. It depends on the airmail service and the countries. Try to get a balance between the sections of the stories. It's not always possible, but don't try to do, I've got the beginning 2 covers, I've got a middle 2 covers, then I've got 78 covers for the end of the story. It's not balanced. So you need to look at balancing the story. All right, let's look at the title page. So the title needs to be clear and concise. You need an introductory statement, which should be about the first paragraph to say what this is about. Then the exhibit shows is the purpose of the exhibit. This is the story that I'm going to tell you, and that's the purpose of the exhibit. It can be put in a box for emphasis. It can be a paragraph. It can be bullet points. It doesn't matter. It's still your exhibit. It's mandatory to have a plan and list the sections of the exhibit. So if you're saying the early years is just page 1 and 2, and then the middle section is page 3 to 127, and the end section is page 128, that really doesn't show us too much balance, but you do need to have a plan, and hopefully the plan looks balanced. In this case, it's done page by page where each of the plan period starts. A lot of people try to balance everything in one frame and then another frame. Sometimes that doesn't tell a good development because you're missing something or you've added too much in to make it fill a frame. So there is a preference that you just tell us from what page to where that each of these sections are. So the example that was just shown, Russian airmails 1922 to 1950. The date 1950 is a bit obscure. And probably what was more important was Moscow to Berlin 40 to 41. This can make the change between 22 to 1941. So look at your scope and make sure it makes sense. Not that I'm keep putting covers on until I've filled my 5 frames and 1950 is where I'm going to end it. It's a story without an end, and you really do need an end. An introductory statement should be the first paragraph. The purpose should be what this is, and you saw it was in a box. The plan can state each of the sections start. Judges like this. It's easy for them to find, okay, now I know where that starts now or where that starts. References should be a maximum of 5 or 6. And if you're going to put something sexy on the page, only do it if you don't need any more of the space, and don't make it a huge item, which means you're telling us very little about your exhibit on the title page. Page headings. One of the tricks that the new exhibitor does is has the exhibit title, and then they put it on for the next 80 pages. So that's in my 15 minutes, I'm reading the same title for 80 times. It's a waste of my time. You only need to put the exhibit title on the title page, and for section headings on the first of each of the sections. Then each of the other information on each section should be about that page. Section headings should be a little bit larger than normal. You can use capital letters, bolding, underline, but try not to use too many colors because it can be confusing. I've seen an example where there's 7 different colors. Each color was either it was the treatment or the social part of it, or the actual the postal rate part of it, or whatever. And I had to keep going back to the title page to remember what that color was for. So try not to confuse the judges too much. Other pages use page headings for items. You can use 2 headings in one line, or three headings in one line to save space. So here's an example where 3 parts of the headings in one line. So this is development of air route in Russia via Persia. So we're now looking at destinations, both Canada and USA, and remember it's the World War II period. So we can make each of the pages title, fill you in on where it is in the overall scheme, and talk about this particular page. Here that we've put route information, and most times in developing airmail, the route is very important, and that's bolded in this case. You can bold it, you can italics it, you can put it a different color, but you choose. You can overlap in Aerophilately, but you shouldn't be covering over any particular important marking, and don't hide the address, because that's where telling us where to go. Some sneaky exhibitors will use it to cover up a tear or something. If you get away with it, good on you. Okay, airmail labels, just cause markings, fairly important information to discuss. So it's part of the description of the cover. Where do I find information? So here is just a few things. If you're doing Aerophilately in general, there's airmail labels. It's a great catalogue of airmail labels. Just cause markings, if you Ian McQueen's done a good book and supplements on it. And airmail directional hand stamps, again by Ian McQueen. This is just a few of many books. There should be a listing of material that you can look up on the FIP Aero website. So what is a just cause label or marking? So in the early days of developing airmail routes, the FAM5 route from Miami down to South America, often this is from Managua in Nicaragua. It pays the 15-cent airmail rate, and it also pays the surface rate, because that airmail rate just gets it flowing from Managua to Miami. It's put on a train to New York. It's then put on a ship to Europe, and then dispensed from there. So what those just cause markings are is when it's at the end of its airmail trip, it's then the airmail cachets or the stamp will be crossed out with 2 lines, as you can see on the right-hand side. So that just gives you an idea that airmail is just not just the stamps on the covers, but there's a whole heap of markings that you need to get to know and be familiar with. Another interesting personal research is looking at aircraft movements. When did the flight take off? Who was the captain? How many people on board? All that sort of stuff becomes interesting in airmail exhibits. So here's some more books on aircraft movements, intercontinental airmails, proud 3 volumes, bridging continents. So there is a lot of books that will give you general information about airmail in the periods from about the 20s to the 50s, which is the most interesting part before jet planes came out. Maps, small maps can be helpful, but preferably only show the important part of the story. So don't show us all of the country when you're only going from town to town to town. Then just show us the map that works that out. So this one's showing a Moscow dated stamp for 1922. It's been described as the earliest known. The auction house has put one later. So I would be using it as personal research that my cover is earlier than the one in the auction house that's described as the earliest known. So that really does show up personal research. First flight covers. So in the beginning, developing airmail routes, there was always a first flight cover that says, hey, this is the first day it's flown from here to there. But what the emphasis now is more on commercial mail that was also covered on those flights. Do they have a place in the exhibit? They sure do, because they're the point that tells you when that route was developed, when it actually started. Sometimes the first flight covers have been cancelled with a different date on, so you know that nothing flown on the official date, that it flew afterwards. There's things like bad weather and engine trouble that often delayed airmail flights. So yes, they do have a place. We don't normally see every first flight cover as an exhibit to tell the whole story. Best to follow up with commercial mail. How many covers per page? Whether it be postal stationery, aerograms, or letters, covers that were sent, typically you're looking at 2 covers per page. So a whole story in 128 pages could be around 230 covers or postcards. Can this be achieved and make it look balanced? But often by putting it on proper size paper, the 230 by 285 or 285 by 230, and filling as much of the page as you can and minimizing the overlapping. Try not to make it look like a 2 by 2 with covers top and bottom. Mix it up a little bit, putting them one to one side, one to the other, with the descriptions either side. It's nice to have things mixed up so it looks interesting but still needs to look balanced. Some pages will only have one special items if that is proving that that's your item you want people's attention to be drilled to. Not that I'm missing a cover that should be there. So here's a special item. Again, the cover, it's inward airmails. It's saying it's 1934 and it's out of Australia. And in this case, it's gone to Moscow. Nelson Eustace, a famous Australian author, has indicated that only 3 was flown to Russia. So that's a nice way to stating rarity on this. There's a discussion on the postmarks. Then the route's been defined from Melbourne to Cootamundra, etc., etc. So all the research and everything has been put on that page. So that's the type for a special item, the information you need to put. Don't put a special item and you've got very little to say about it. Then we're not too sure why it's so special. So we're going to judge it. Judging and exhibiting are the 2 sides of the same coin. One of the aims that I'm hoping as judges, you will become better exhibitors. The more you judge, the more you see good things you like, bad things you don't like, and that'll help you improve your exhibit. So let's look at the point system again. 20 marks for treatment, same as trad. 10 marks for important, same as trad. 35 marks for knowledge and research, same. Condition, 10. Rarity, 20, presentation 5. So Aero Flatly is judged with the same marking systems as in traditional. And as these presentations go on, other than thematic, you'll find that they're all judged the same way. All right, presentation. We spoke quite a bit about presentation. It's only 5 points, but it influences all the categories in there. If it's something that I enjoy reading, I enjoy looking at, or whatever, all of a sudden, psychologically, my mind's thinking higher marks. If it's a struggle to read, if it looks horrible, it looks like it was a last minute put together, I'd be struggling to find the correct points that it deserves. So while it's only 5 points, it's an important 5 points. Does the title page and other pages look neat? Are the headings clear? Try to use one font type throughout the whole exhibit. That's a good starting place. Are the write-ups easy to read? Have you not had lengthy paragraphs? Can you shorten it so people get what's going on without actually going through lengthy paragraphs. So knowledge, if you cannot easily read the write-up, the treatment will go down, the knowledge will go down, and also your presentation has created that. The layout, avoid tram lines. That's just like 2 by 2 by 2, all in the same neat row, looking like a tram line. Avoid the long paragraphs. Put spaces, lines between paragraphs, so you know if you're going to write a paragraph where it stops and starts. You're not writing a book, so you don't need those grammatically correct sentences. Use short sentences, use dash. If I'm going that my flight goes Perth to Adelaide to Sydney, I can do Perth dash Adelaide dash Sydney. The judges know that's the route that it took. Bold important words, places, routes, and dates. All right, treatment. So treatment is the development and it's the story chosen. So you have a variety of stories to tell in airmail. So it's a little bit different from traditional. It might be more just stamps of a period of time, but treatment can be in various areas. It has to tell a good subject of the, tell a good story of the subject chosen. So does the story develop logical? You know, in the beginning, there was a flight to see if we could fly the distance, and there was some pre email route mail that was flown, something like that. This is when the official airmail was done. We've had a first flight cover. We've manufactured 500. We've flown them all, and they've got there. So is it a logical development? Through the middle of it, as the volume of mail increases, has the distance between when each time it was flying made a difference? There's whole heaps of development stories. Has it got a good title page? And remember, we spoke in traditional, there's mandatory items. There's no difference here. Is the title correct for the material in the exhibit? For instance, I'm talking about mail that was flown during the war from Africa to Australia, and I only put aerograms in. Would this be better to be an aerogram story, or can you tell the story correctly with just one type of material? That's all up to what the exhibitor's done and whether they've sold it. Is the story told well? Is it developed in accordance with a plan? No use putting a plan on the title page and don't follow it. So do they do that? Is it a story, or is it that we've got 150 covers and we've put them chronological on pages and just put headings on? Or is it a real story? Do the headings help in understanding the treatment? Does the treatment's our development? Does the headings on really help us with the treatment? Is there duplication or padding? Every exhibitor will put padding where they can't find an item they want to put in there, and they'll remove it later. Not always noticeable, 1 or 2 items. However, when you've got 5 or 6 pages with the same covers going to the same destination, that is definitely duplication and easily seen by the judges. So treatment, as I've always said, is defined as development, completeness, and correctness of the material shown. Philatelic importance. The importance of an Aero philatelic exhibit is determined by the significance of the exhibit in relation to that chosen field and the overall significance of that subject in the development of airmail services. So your country, my country's Nicaraguan, the airmail route started in 1929. It was significant for that country. But as far as the FAM5 route that was developed from Miami, it's probably not as significant. So importance, we'll look at the relationship of those two. Don't get too hung up about importance when you first start judging, because your other judges that will be judging with you will guide you in that particular area. But most times what the number is what it's always going to be. Aerophilatic exhibits in an area with greater contribution to the development of the world airmail service has the greater amount of importance. Some important subjects are Great Britain, the airmail service in Great Britain, Australia 1919 to 1939, France to South America, KLM, Netherlands to Dutch East Indies. These are important beginnings of airmail service and more important subjects to be specialising in. While geographic area is generally more important than a narrow one, the fact that I flew it from Perth to Adelaide is that important as flying from Perth to Sydney to London. The larger geographic areas is more important. That's the important part about Aerophilately. Not that we can get it from one town to another, but we can get it around the other side of the world. The pioneer period and development period is generally more important than modern ones. So in the beginning, when they started, that's pretty much more important. Long periods generally are more important than shorter ones. Be careful, it can depend on the country and the year. World War II, 6 years, but can be split into a number of areas. So whether you can justify 8 frames telling a story of that whole 6 years, or whether you use 8 frames to tell just the beginning part of World War II. Philatelic and related knowledge, personal studies and research, 35 points. So demonstrated by shown and the relative write-up analysis. So again, the first thing we look for is, have they chosen all the right items? Have they written them up well? So that's the beginning part. Personal study is shown by correct analysis of items shown. So they've investigated some markings that haven't been described, and they gone ahead and researched it and then put their information on there. Personal research that's shown by new facts related to the subject, something discovered by the exhibitor themselves and highlighted. Write-up requires more than just what has been seen on the cover. Face value of individual stamps is not required unless it's subclass B. The total postage and the correct rate for what period. If you've got a whole heap of stamps or one stamp that makes up the rate, you need to describe what that rate is, how that rate is made up. And then you saw the original Nicaraguan airmail, there was surface rate plus an airmail rate. And if it's registered, there'll be a registration rate as well. And you need to show your knowledge by breaking down each of those rates. Does the write-up show existing literature that has been used? Again, if you've got it there and you're referring it to it, we know that you're heading in the right direction. The information, however, should not overwhelm the philatelic material to the point where you describe everything, including the letter inside when it comes to airmail. So really those short descriptions. So avoid long descriptions where possible. New information published, personal research by the exhibitor should be identified, where it's been published, and include any references. It's also nice to make it more obvious to the judge that this is your research. So words like in headings, new discovery, that sort of brings it to their attention. An exhibitor may be the expert on the subject and have published books, but must not judge the knowledge or the contents of the book, but what's documented in the exhibit. So as in most judges, please don't judge the person, judge the exhibit. Condition of Aerophilately items and what quality is available. You're looking for the best possible condition. Clear, legible postmarks and cachets. Good general appearance should be rewarded. Hopefully not torn, and showing the stamp, clearly the postmark. The stamp should be in good condition. Crash covers will be in poor condition. That's what happens with crash covers. And it's important that you don't mark down condition. If the whole story is crash covers, then the condition has to be the condition of the markings that you can see on the crash, but not the burnt edges, etc., or whether the stamps have been floated off in the water. So you need a bit of common sense when dealing conditions. Fake or repaired items need to be described. If they're not described, will be penalised. Rarity. Always, I've determined that rarity is not just about the dollars that you pay for an item. All right. Rarity is directly related to the scarcity of the aerophilatelic items. I have items that only 3 have been flown on that route, but haven't cost me $10,000 each. So it's your description and your knowledge of the rarity that's more important than the money that you've paid for it. For rarity statements, it's important to state the source. So if it's one of 10 recorded, where was it recorded? Avoid terms like very rare, extremely rare, unique. Please use one of so many recorded. And if you're going to state one of two recorded, be careful. There's other exhibits that might have 3 or 4 of them. Judges will easily pick that up and go back to it. So make sure it's accurate. Auction sales eBay often is a good guide to rarity. So if you're not too sure, do some investigation. Quickest route, how many more exist mounted on red? While I'm not a big fan of red matting, it's personal preference, but the main thing is that one, their way of determining what is rare is explained on the title page, and the moment you mark it up as rare, you need to have the description to explain. So just by matting everything and putting it on a page is not going to tell me it's rare. We still need your knowledge about that rarity. So final comments. We've covered a lot of areas to produce a good exhibit. We've covered how we're going to judge the exhibit. We need to exhibit regularly so that we stay on top of the rules. And also we need to improve our own exhibits. Why? Because the standard year after year is getting better. Something that got a gold 20 years ago in Aero Philately, if nothing changes, would be struggling to get a gold 20 years later. So please improve your exhibits, keep putting them in on a regular time, become the exhibitor, become the judge, become the exhibitor, and improve in both areas. Best of luck with exhibiting and your judging, and please, it's a hobby and you need to enjoy it. So please do that. All right, so we've now got to the spot where we can ask questions. I'm hoping that I can put that down and see everyone again, because there was no one there when I was doing that. So do we have any questions on Aero Philately, Traditional Philately, or anything about the course at all?
Glenn, how does Aero Philately differ from the other classes?
Oh, gee, that's a tough one. Well, from traditional, subclass B doesn't. All right. So whatever you do in traditional, the only problem is you won't have a classic period because most aeros started in the 20s, unless you do balloon mail or some special areas like this. But as far as subclass A, the story really is the development of the airmail routes, the airmail system, the airline itself. So it really is the story that involves anything but includes airmail. So it's a little bit more postal history slant, because we're talking, rates, routes, and markings. We do see documents. So if we're, development of Pan Am and how they did the first airmail routes, there might be documentations in there. So good question. So traditional and subclass B, very similar. Subclass A, more similar to postal history, but enough differences that it has a class of its own. So please consider at least attempting an airmail exhibit at some stage, either the stamps or the development of the air routes.
Just a question on rarity.
Yep.
If you have something, one of 5 known,
yep.
And you've got a certificate for that,
yeah.
Do you actually have to state it? I mean, you put 1 of 5 known,
yep.
and then, certificate included.
Yeah.
Do you have to sort of add more than that and describe how you know that it's...
So you've got a certificate that's
so.
confirmed that there is only 5 known, and you've stated that certificate, and you've left the certificate behind just in case the expert group don't believe you. That's it, because we're judging 2 parts of rarity. One is the item. 2 is you. You put an item up that's 1 of 5 known and you don't even tell us 1 of 5 recorded, then we don't know if you know, even though it's got a certificate. So yes, again, I'm asking you to be as minimal as possible in your explanation, but as accurate and correct as possible, and we get it. So there's a bit of a balance. And how does it work? Well, you do your first exhibit and you verbose, and then the judge says too many words. So you cut them all out, and the judge says, we didn't get it because you got not enough words. And eventually you get that Goldilocks just right way of describing things. And there's no easier way than just doing it and then getting feedback on it. So
well, I mean, that's what I've done. I just was wondering whether I should write more. 1 of whatever known and then certificate enclosed.
As long as you've told us that, because I've done traditional exhibits where, okay, so you've got a proof here. You haven't even told me it's a proof, let alone it's only one known. And they said, oh, you should know that. I said, well, I do know it. But what I don't know is whether the exhibitor knows it. So I'm not marking my knowledge. I'm marking the exhibitor's knowledge. So it's important, even when they have a proof, that they tell us a proof. And the best ones is specimen. And then underneath, I can read specimen on any item, is the word specimen. And I'm going, well, is it a UPU specimen? Is it a printer specimen? Is it the salesman specimen? Is it the dealer's put specimen on because he just got it behind the thing? Is it the post office specimen, so they know these type of stamps are the only legitimate stamps that can come through my post office? So already I've just told you 5 things it could be. Putting the word specimen, what does that mean? It means that you can write what's on the item, but you haven't told me anything else. So it's important that you get that balance right.
Yeah, thank you.
So is everyone happy with their first 2 classes that they're going to be judging or looking at, or the rules?
There's a lot to digest.
Yeah. and please don't get hung up that I'm going to quiz you on what section 3.2 of the SREVs are. That ain't going to happen. What's more important is you have an understanding. So when you have it, and remember, judging's a team approach. There's not just one of you judging, or else we wouldn't be accurate enough. There's typically 3 or 4 in a team, and it's always discussion, and we prefer consensus. Rarely do you have one person going, my mark's right, your mark's wrong. You have discussion until you can get a consensus, and that becomes the mark. What's more important for you as a new judge is that you're involved with that discussion. Nothing worse than an apprentice sitting back and just listening to everything and not saying anything. I'd rather an apprentice stand up and say, I think this, and be totally wrong, than say nothing, because even the judges don't know whether your time is valuable in the jury. So please don't be afraid to speak up and explain what you think. You know, and sometimes the new judge is the only one that knows that particular field, because we don't know every field. We don't know every country. We don't know every class. So please speak up where you can.
Ben, could you possibly stop sharing so we can see everybody?
Oh, okay. Good idea. Stop sharing. It's just that I can see everyone. Did that stop?
Yes.
Now you can see everyone. Oh, welcome, Bernie. So, Bernie,
can I ask a question?
Yes.
You mentioned that commercial mail is more appreciated than philatelic items in terms of first day covers. But with items like the Zeppelin mail, etc., it would appear that even a lot of the commercial covers have been philatalized quite a bit in order to take advantage of the fact that it was a big deal. It was going to South America on a Zeppelin.
Yeah, so very true. And that should be part of your story. I mean, what's generally flown that's not philatelic on a Zeppelin? That could be an interesting story in itself. So I had one that I judged was second day mail on a developed airmail route. So he deliberately didn't put anything philatelic in and found this. It's not the next day. It's the second day it was flown. And you know how difficult out of 100 or 230 covers to make everyone the next flight covers. You have to give that guy high rarity marks. Sure. But if he does all the first flight covers and there's 25 known, 150 known, 500 known, then, you know, they're easy to track down. You just got to pay the money to the dealers. But often I can find the second flight in dealer boxes that are €1 or €2 or $1 or $2. It's just I've got to go through a hell of a lot of boxes. That's all. So never underestimate a topic that can give you better rarity, but a lot more work for you. That's all. But getting back to Zeppelin covers, most of them are philatelic, but what's the important part of describing is the rate is correct, the route is correct, and that you understand every marking on there and you tell that correct story. That's a good question, Frank. Thank you for that.